Hey guys, today we're driving my 2022 Subaru BRZ. I just got out of a 2022 Civic Si and I wanted to compare how that was to drive to this BRZ. I just posted the What Was a Civic Si Like to Road Trip video, and I also just did a road trip in my BRZ. So I've got a lot of seat time in both vehicles. I have 3,600 miles on my BRZ and I just drove this Si 1,200 miles over a couple days to Nashville and back. So it's all fresh in my mind. I wanted to talk about some of the maybe not so obvious differences between the cars. Naturally, this is a two-door rear-wheel drive sports coupe. The Civic Si is a four-door performance-oriented fun-to-drive sedan. Both have 6-speed manual transmissions. Both have around 200 horsepower. This is rated at 228. The Civic is around 200 or so. Both are around $30,000. So I feel like a lot of people will still be cross-shopping these vehicles, even though they are inherently very different types of vehicle. So there's some of the obvious differences. Civic Si is going to be way more practical, but the BRZ isn't bad either as a practical solution as your only vehicle. It's got a decent amount of trunk space. It does have 2 rear seats. I do fit my rear-facing child seat in one of them occasionally. We do have a smaller trunk opening in this latest generation of BRZ. That is one of my few complaints, and it feels like this trunk space is a little bit higher too. I have retrofitted a spare tire in my BRZ. I think you could also do the same for the Civic Si. Neither car comes with a spare tire for the United States market, but you could do it. And I think if that's a concern for you, I live in Michigan where our roads are very unpredictable. Never know when you're going to hit a massive pothole or run over a nail, and a spare tire is a good idea. Personally, I like the looks of the BRZ just a little bit better. This is a sportier, more fun to drive, sexy platform. It's a little bit quicker too, but gosh, I really did enjoy driving the Si all week. Both kind of follow the same philosophy of simplicity and functionality. This BRZ is a great car to live with on a daily basis. Lots of physical controls, and I think in this new generation it looks fantastic as well, both inside and out. One big win with the Honda Civic Si is fuel economy. I was averaging 38 to 40 miles to the gallon on my road trip with the Civic Si, whereas in this BRZ, I averaged about 29 to 33 miles to the gallon. Same speeds, similar type of driving scenarios, about a 10 mpg difference. Also, premium fuel is required in this BRZ. You can run 87 octane in the Civic Si no problem, even though 91 is recommended. So that's something to consider too if you're trying to save a few bucks at the pump. In the Civic Si, I was seeing about $31 fill-ups at just under $4 per gallon. Luckily, gas prices are starting to go down just a little bit. So let's talk about driving experience. The BRZ immediately has much heavier control weights. I do have an M-Tech clutch pedal spring, clutch helper spring in this BRZ, and that adds just a little bit of weight to the clutch and a little bit better feel. The steering's a bit heavier in the Civic Si, and I think it actually has more feel. I do like the weight of the steering in the new BRZ, but it's definitely given up some of that feedback for maybe a little bit more assistance. Civic Si steering is beautifully weighted, pretty good feel around corners. You have a really nice idea of how much traction you have with the front end. This BRZ is a little bit lighter, a little bit vaguer than the previous generation, but as a result, I think it makes the car feel more nimble and a little bit more happy to fling around. It's kind of a split between the Miata steering, which is super light, very kind of tossable, and the previous generation BRZ and Toyota 86. Civic Si probably wins the 6-speed manual shifter competition. This BRZ shifter is great and a big improvement from the previous generation. It's a lot smoother on cold starts, very clearly defined gates, really nice to shift through, but the Si is just perfection. That little 6-speed manual shifter is just one of the best in the business. Feels very similar to the previous gen Civic Type R, and Honda always does a great job with their shifters, though this BRZ is a close second. Neither car really sounds particularly inspiring. The one advantage is you can make these BRZs sound pretty good with a few aftermarket modifications. Civic Si exhaust just sounds like a Honda motor, which you may like or you may not. BRZ does have a much higher redline, about 7,500 RPM. The Civic's is pretty low at 6,500 RPM redline. We briefly talked about interiors, but let's go a little bit more in depth. Sound systems, for example. Civic Si has a branded Bose sound system, and it's miles better than what's in this BRZ. This BRZ is still an improvement, even in this base premium model from the previous generation, but it doesn't hold a candle to the Si sound system. One advantage to the BRZ is you can do that. The revvy nature of this motor is really fun. Handling is excellent. Both cars have about the same amount of mechanical grip. The Si is hugely capable on a back road. The traction from that front limited slip differential is fantastic. Both cars are really fun to hustle, really fun to drive. I think you'd have a great time in either option. BRZ has a lot less rev hang, virtually no rev hang. Civic Si still has a little bit. It's so much better than the 10th generation used to be, but it is still a little bit of a hindrance to the complete and utter driving enjoyment of that car. Not a deal breaker by any means, but it does just kind of hamper some of that hard driving enjoyment. This BRZ is pretty fun to hustle. BRZ is a little bit louder on the highway. There's just more noise from the tires, the road, the wind. The only complaint that I had this week with the Civic Si is that the tires are just a little bit loud. These Michelin Primacies are about on the same level. They get a little bit howly at some speeds on some surfaces. Over expansion joints and potholes, they echo quite a bit into the cabin. So just a note there. I think there's a little bit more wind noise in the BRZ, a little bit less cabin isolation and sound deadening material here. Granted, it is quite a bit lighter than the Civic Si by a couple hundred pounds almost. But the Civic Si is definitely a quieter driving experience for long journeys. That's not to say, though, that this BRZ isn't a bad road trip car. On this 17-inch Primacies, it's much more livable and much more comfortable than it is on the 18s, which are pretty loud tires. Those Michelin Pilot Sport 4S tires are super loud on the limited BRZ. The road noise in the BRZ never really bothered me too much on my longer drives with it. I spent about 8 hours driving this once from Road America to Detroit, and it was loud, but it wasn't punishing. I didn't feel like I couldn't hold a conversation on the phone or I couldn't enjoy my music. It was just a little bit louder, but a lot quieter still than the previous generation. The Civic Si just adds even more comfort and livability to the road trip driving experience, just because it's a sedan and it's got a little more sound insulation and sound deadening. Ultimately, I think the BRZ is more fun to drive. It's rear-wheel drive. You can chuck this thing into a corner, slide it around a little bit. It's got a little more of an active chassis, whereas the Civic Si is very planted, very stable, really capable, very high limits, especially on the summer-oriented Goodyear Eagle tires. This BRZ is a little bit more playful. Both cars, I think, will do pretty well on the track with a set of upgraded pads, improved temperature, higher temp brake fluid, maybe some brake cooling modifications. I hit pretty heavy brake fade in this BRZ in my first track session with it, and after a couple laps, and I did just fit it with a set of DBA 4000 rotors, which was my solution to brake fade with my previous generation BRZ. I haven't taken it out on track since I did that upgrade, but I assume this will improve cooling quite a bit. They have a lot of internal cooling fins, and they're also grooved to just kind of dissipate heat a little bit better and get some of those pad gases extracted from the pad under heavy braking. Nice amount of torque in this BRZ. The power band here is so linear that it's a little bit quicker than you expect. The Civic Si really only wakes up above 3,000 RPM. That's when that turbo can start to spool. It is an engine that loves to rev, but that rev limit is a little bit lower. Gearing's shorter in the Civic Si too. That's nice. enjoy that manual just a little bit more. The gearing in this BRZ is a little bit taller. They've gone back down to the 4:10 final drive ratio. Both cars are easy enough to drive around normally. If you're just learning to drive a manual transmission, or you are a seasoned 3-pedal driver, both cars will be fun, satisfying, easy to drive. Both the SI and the BRZ are a little bit tough to get a smooth start out of sometimes, but for the most part, it's a rewarding, enjoyable manual driving experience. Great visibility in both cars too. The SI does have blind spot monitoring, does have lane keep assist, does have adaptive cruise control. This BRZ is old school. You don't get any of that stuff. I will say the BRZ rides a lot better than the Civic Si. The BRZ specifically, compared to the GR86, has much softer suspension. The ride quality in this car is excellent. It's almost, I always like to say, it just rides like a Toyota Camry. The suspension is very comfortable, something I definitely appreciate here in the Midwest, in the snow and salt belt. Here in Michigan, over these potholed roads, this is a much more comfortable car to drive on rough pavement than the Civic Si is. Ultimately, it comes down to, what do you want? Do you want a rear-wheel drive sports car, or do you want a front-wheel drive sports sedan? The BRZ is just slightly more fun to drive, and the Civic Si is just slightly better to drive on a daily basis. It's, of course, much more practical, but from a driving enjoyment factor, I put the BRZ just a little bit higher. From a daily livability factor, the SI I put a little bit higher. So it kind of depends where you stand on that spectrum. You have to look at your needs as an owner, how you use your vehicle. Is this your only car? Is this a fun car? Can you get away with the BRZ as your only vehicle? Do you take your passengers around occasionally? Do you need to put bigger items in the trunk? You're a little bit more limited with the usability in this newer generation BRZ. You're not going to be able to fit large items in the back of this because the trunk opening is slightly smaller. Can you work around that limitation with a car like this, or do you just need something with a little bit better usability on a day-to-day basis? The Civic Si, I've got to say, is just one of the best overall cars on the market right now for the enthusiast who wants something that's fun to drive, gets great fuel economy, and is reasonably priced. I'm actually trying to get, right now, an allocation for a Civic Type R. I love the Si so much this week that I am 100% sold on a Type R in this 11th generation. Hopefully I can get one at close to MSRP with little to no markup. That's going to be a little bit challenging, but I will do my best, and we'll see what we can make happen here. I probably own both. I don't really plan on selling this BRZ anytime soon. I've really enjoyed it, and I definitely want to get a winner out of this car, because I think that's kind of the most fun time to drive these cars, is in the snow. For now, any new plans with the BRZ? Ultimately, I'm trying to get a set of Bridgestone RE71 RSs. I'd like to get 1 or 2 track days in on those tires and test out these new brakes, and also see how that tire handles on the street. I have been enjoying these Primacies, but again, they're a little bit loud, and the grip from them is a bit more than I was expecting. You can't really toss these tires around as much as you used to be able to on the previous gen BRZ. There's more grip from the rear end in this car, and it's honestly not as fun of a tire as I thought. So I'm thinking in the summer I'm just going to go full grip, get a sticky set of performance tires, probably in 16s, 205, 55 R16. I need some extra sidewall for our Michigan roads, and I want to go a little bit narrower so that I have a grippy car, but still a little bit of a playful chassis. I'm not too interested in getting lap times out of this BRZ or outright grip. All right, we'll end the video on that note. Thanks for watching. Let me know if you guys have any questions. If you want to see some more in-depth Civic Si videos, go check out Tedward's channel. He has bought one, and he's probably got 6,000 miles on his Si by now. He's been driving the crap out of that thing, way more than I have in my BRZ. So he'll be able to offer some great ownership impressions and comparison between the Civic Si and BRZ. If you want to watch some of my BRZ videos, some of his Si videos, you can't go wrong. All right, guys, that's it for this one. Thanks for watching. We'll see you later.